Hello, I'm Earle with Victory Leadership. And not long ago, I was at it was like a networking event for organizations, businesses, different people who are either representing themselves or representing larger organizations. And we get together and we discuss, shop over a couple of things. And one of the things I heard was a discussion around change management. And this one individual was talking about change management in their department, and they were part of leading that change management effort forward. A little further discussion, they were changing a couple of things to make the department a little more efficient and face the changes in their industry. And one of the things that I've noticed that they were trying a mix of different things, and one of them that I've heard quite a few times over the past year or so is Kotter's 8 Steps, which is a great change management model as it provides a walk through the different areas or elements that can help create a more successful change management implementation, especially since 70% of change management implementations fail to achieve whatever the results that they had initially set out for in the first place. Well, since I've heard this a couple of times, I would say more than a couple, I've heard this several times, some of the challenges, and either one, they're just kind of paraphrasing the information in the change management model, which I understand that time is very limited and a very important factor. But one of the things that I hear coming up over and over again, I decided to take and put together into more of a Q&A where there were people who had submitted to me, these are the areas that I'm having challenges with in this area. These are the things I'm having challenges with in that area. So I've assembled and I put together the questions that I found that were asked the most in reference to using Kotter's 8 Steps that I came across, that I created a separate podcast for. It was based on what I discovered, what people were asking about the most, and then I just relayed that out. That will then help guide those individuals with those questions towards areas that they may be able to leverage a more meaningful solution to help move their change management forward. Even when we have the steps to go from beginning to end, it's not uncommon to get hung up on one of them or two of them as moving forward and how to make that application to your organization. So without further ado, here are those questions. Okay, so now we're at that section where there were, I want to make sure I set all phasers to stun. The last thing I need is somebody calling me asking me how I want to reduce my electric bill. So with that out of the way, some of the questions that I had received were around Kotter's 8-step process. And over the past couple years, I've heard very similar stories around using Kotter's 8 Steps. I think Kotter's 8 Steps is a great starting point, but with a lot of tools in the management arsenal that anybody would use, I would say that using any single tool is going to treat every problem with how that tool can be used. So, contrary to popular demand, you can't or popular preference that not everything can be solved with a roll of duct tape, a butter knife, and a hammer. Butter knife doesn't make a great screwdriver. Hammers can't drive screws, and the duct tape, well, I guess as long as it doesn't get wet. Although there's some real good duct tape out there, but with the response to Kotter's 8 steps, I thought that some of the questions that I have encountered regularly would be beneficial to put something together that people could refer to just to stimulate a response or a request or search for additional information. This is not by all means exhaustive, but going through Kotter's steps, if you're not familiar with them, there is the first step is to create a sense of urgency. The second one is to form a powerful coalition. Third is to create a vision. The fourth, communicate that vision. The fifth, empower others to act. 6, plan for and create short-term wins. 7, consolidate improvements while producing additional changes. And 8, the final one, institutionalize the new approaches. Well, over the years, I've seen a couple of questions that are similar come up over and over again. So the first one, in establish a sense of urgency, the question I have, slightly varying degrees, but for the most part, this is one of the questions that I've seen often, is that my people seem not to treat urgent matters as urgent. Is there a better way to engage them? And the first step, creating a sense of urgency, may create a certain level of anxiety in people if it is not delivered quite well. This is something that I learned when I was at Case, that was considered a NEA, or negative emotional attractor, and consequently there's a positive emotional attractor. And when you're confronted with an NEA situation, or when people are less likely to think creatively. The NEA leverages psychosomatic responses like preparing for fight or flight conditions, or what some people will do is they'll freeze. And that's in a sense that's almost like a fright. So fright, flight, or fight. So you can throw those 3 together. Say it real fast 3 times. I dare you. But this state can increase physical stress when it's repeated, leading to long-term susceptibility to increased illnesses. So people who are under stress will have, or can potentially have, more physiological problems, ulcers, high blood pressure, all these different elements that come along with this fight or flight, where your adrenaline, your natural adrenaline is kicking in, and your muscles are squeezing the blood from your extremities to your main muscle groups. That's preparing you physically for that fight or flight experience. And that's why there's times, if you remember this, when you're in one of these situations, just touch the tip of your fingers to the back of your hand, and do they feel cold? And not when you're outside in the wintertime or in cold weather, but when you're in one of those situations, and it might be difficult to remember this because you're dealing with something else at the time, but that is a physical response to this mental stimulation, and when that happens, again, the level of creative thought and creative thought, one and the same, and logical thinking, all of those are taking back place. When you touch a hot surface, you're not thinking about, hey, how am I going to I'm going to move my hand away from this surface. It's hot. Should I take it straight up? Should I take it to the left? Should I turn it off? And will it cool down fast? No, you jerk it away. It's difficult to combat that, to suppress it, or to use logical thought, when to use logical thought, and when to let that response, that automatic response, let it do its thing. And just on the opposite of NEA, the PEA, as I kind of alluded to, leverages the thought centers responsible for logical and creative thinking. So this state, a person is more relaxed. They don't feel as threatened, or they don't feel threatened. And that allows that creative portion from the frontal lobe, of the brain to kind of take hold and develop a solution for that has increased long-term stability, because there's not the anxiety, there's not the frustration that's getting in the way of that creative thinking process. And I'll have some additional information. This is going to be recorded, and there will be more materials that you can take a look at later for each of these areas that can work along with the 8-step deployment. So there are those who grab the 8 steps and they read it, and they have a little trouble utilizing tools. It's like the tires are worn out, you have to take it off the rim. Well, how do I get it off the rim? Well, some of these other elements, first step, of course, is to replace the tire, or new tires, and you want to get the tire off the rim. So that's what some of this other information is doing. It's helping you to engage other areas that may help you get the tire off the rim. And so in essence, now that we know that there's this protection that's built into us, this negative emotional attractor, and then there's this creative positive emotional attractor, delivering the sense of urgency, try not to deliver it as a sense of emergency. And there are times when things have to get moving, and hopefully the whole process hasn't waited to get to the last minute, but unfortunately sometimes that happens. And in case if it has done so, if it has reached that point, then maybe we want to refer to it more as a sense of opportunity. What are some of those areas that we can actually help deliver this information in a way that we're not candy coating it, but we're looking at it from a perspective of how we can remain relevant in our industry. So when people start to see that the leadership or the change management team is thinking about solutions, then there's something for them to grasp on initially, at least, even if they are not 100% sure that your solutions are going to hold water, so to speak, but there is at least something out there, and different strategies that can leverage the feasibility or the desire to make a change, because where we're at is not going to be as plentiful as where we're going to look to go. And keeping the future in proper perspective, we need to make a change, and using tactics that are more strength-based. Like one is a thin book of SOAR, and again, this additional information will be at the end of this recording, versus a SWOT analysis. A lot of us are familiar with SWOT: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, where SOAR is built around strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So a more of a strength-based approach. So that is one of the things I would say, that if people aren't treating it as urgent, they may be in denial that there's a problem because they don't want to confront it. So engaging them in a way that leverages the change as an opportunity may help get people moving. The second one, forming a powerful coalition. The question that I've received most often is, who are the people I should include on the team? And do I make sure that only those who are supporting the change are allowed? Well, people who are for the change definitely are your cheerleaders, so to speak. They will work towards presenting the change in a positive perspective. However, as you move forward through the change process, you are going to come across those who are kind of doubtful. They're, again, going back to, the negative emotional attractor, they may not be in the state of mind, depending on how the change was presented, that is going to give them the warm and fuzzy about it. So there are benefits to getting people who are not comfortable and understanding what their fears are. Very likely you're going to come across other people in the organization that are going to have similar fears, and if you understand and know what those are ahead of time, then you have a little more insight into what those are, and you can then address them. So that way, as you start to move forward with your change management process, that there is a little insight and a plan that you can help to engage those naysayers by including them on the team. Not that you want to overstaff them or have toxic people on the team, but those who, and not necessarily say that they would be on the guiding team, but including or investigating, interviewing, however, to get the information from those who are not very comfortable can lead to some insight into how to navigate around some of those areas of concern. And one area that Kotter has in his book, Accelerate, was a dual operating system. So if you have an organization that is very heavy in a bureaucracy, or is a very large organization, has a very large top-down organizational distance, then creating a group of individuals that are selected from the different levels to come together, not necessarily create a skunk's work, but to operate a little bit more freely and a little more autonomously with an entrepreneur perspective that can react a little bit quicker. That's why some small organizations can all of a sudden take on larger organizations in certain industries, because they have less to wade through in the organization. So I would recommend that finding those who are on board for the change, and then also getting information from those who may, and this is going to be an ongoing process throughout the whole change modeling, is leveraging those naysayers. So that's how you would, or how one of the ways you could put together a coalition. Those who support it include information and stay in contact with those who don't, to get an understanding why. Third is creating a vision. The question is, how do I get involvement from those who do not align with the vision? Okay, a very common challenge. And some of those challenges may be in regards to, again, going back to the fight or flight or freeze, that they don't necessarily understand what their role will be in the vision. They are a little apprehensive about it. They're good at what they're doing now, even if the change is obviously or subtly coming to an end. However, when they're not exactly sure, they may then limit their engagement, their involvement. So it's important that all of those that are going to be affected by the change, especially within the organization, you may want to consider subcontractors and vendors and suppliers and so forth in this change, especially if you need support from them to help this change move forward in your organization. But when there's a way that you can continuously or show people their involvement is important and necessary, then they feel that need. They are not as skeptical or in the dark that what they're going to contribute is is going to be effective, or if it's going to be important to the change management project. So getting involvement from them is showing them, at times you have to show them where they can engage, and when they feel important, then they are start to see how their skill set can help move the project forward. And then the fourth step, communicating the vision. And a question I've received: what is the best way to communicate the vision so people are not left out? It's important that they recognize that they don't want to leave people out, and it is definitely something you don't want to keep people in the dark, because then they have a tendency to make up their own answers for answers that don't or is not as forthcoming to their questions. So be transparent. I recommend transparency, and choose a medium or multiple mediums to communicate the vision. And the vision, depending on the objectives of that vision, this might be a good point to, between here and the previous, creating the vision, engaging various members of the organization to create a shared vision. Then it extends out extends the vision to where other people put more of themselves into the ability to create a solution or to contribute to the solution. And part of that communications is, what are the ways to actively get people the information necessary so they don't feel left out. It may come through email. That might not work, or emails in addition to, maybe there is a chart that's kept in common areas, and certain people are tasked with keeping it up to date. That shows how close they're getting to the goal, how close we as an organization or as a department are moving towards the goal that has the shared vision that we are striving for. And that helps keep people engaged. Sometimes when people don't see things moving, they don't move. And if they don't know that things are moving forward, then they may, it's just taking effort. So they just may sit back and get the idea in their mind that this isn't happening. My meager efforts are not going to change the perception of the way things are. And again, it is a perception. So the perception is either right or it's inaccurate. But you don't want to leave room for people to draw the wrong conclusions. So communications is imperative. And how you actually do that is by keeping the information out in front of those who are going to be part of the change as much as possible. And depending on what your organization is working on, there are going to be some things that you may not want to divulge because they're trade secrets or their industry or their corporate formulations and things like that. That's understood. However, when moving forward, that the larger perspective, the 30,000 foot overview, they know what part of the flight plan that they're on and where they're at, so that they do see some forward momentum, that they see things moving, that they can then feel better about being a part of the solution, and that their contributions are being taken and they are meaningful. And the fifth one, empowering others to act on the vision. And one of the questions I received is, how do change champions get taken seriously? Well, when you empower others, you should give them the authority necessary to enact. It doesn't help to tie people's hands, so to speak. When trained and briefed and know how to move forward and with a proper set of instructions, they can take changes, they can empower others, they can do things that actually contribute towards a freedom of flow for changes to happen. When there's a lot of, I'll get back to you on that, or let me check with so-and-so, and it's perfectly natural for those to be the answer for the moment. However, they can't stay there for very long. An answer does have to be forthcoming. Otherwise, it starts to lead to some skepticism. It can lead to skepticism that the change management process is moving forward, and people start to feel that there is less of a knowledge of where we're going, and that creates doubt in the whole process. And with Kotter's sixth step, planning for and creating short-term wins. And one of the questions that I get about this is, how do I encourage people through the change process? This is incredibly important. There has to be a sense of momentum of moving forward, that something is actually going on, that's happening, that's helping reach the goal, and that people who are contributing are an important part of this. This can come from any number of directions, and this is where leadership can be creative, and also asking for the advice from the people who are a part of the change. So whether it's awards, whether it's gift certificates, to any number of places, it can be a public recognition, any of those things that help to make people feel good about themselves and the change while moving it forward. They want more of that, and they are more likely to reciprocate that support that the organization provides them, then has a tendency of coming back, of those who want to work harder to see the change that is going to not only be good for me, but for my coworkers and for our clients, that this is a great direction, that we're going in the right direction, and people are being recognized for it. When people are recognized, their devotion can increase, and anything that moves them into that positive emotional attractor, that PEA moment, is good for change management endeavors in a company or a department, in a neighborhood, in a government, anywhere really. Kotter's seventh step is consolidating improvements and producing still more change. And the question I get, how do we prevent from sliding back into the old way of doing things? Well, it does take to solidify. One, you want to let people know that It's okay not to know how to do the new thing right immediately. This is something that we're all a part of. Nobody's going to yell at you. Nobody's going to be upset with you that you don't know exactly what you're doing at first. We're going to get to a point where that is going to increase, where we're doing more of the new thing and less of the old thing. Now, more than likely, you're not going to be able to shut down your department or your organization through the change process. So you're not going to cut it off and say, okay, this is what we were doing on Friday. Now this is what we're doing on Monday. That can be unhealthy. If you start to maneuver in a way that the change is planned to where the new way is slowly coming in, or say gradually coming in, to where maybe the old way is 90% and the new way is 10%, and that becomes an 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, and so forth. As it continues to move, people are getting comfortable with the new way of doing things the new way, and that apprehension, that negative emotional attractor is diminishing and the positive is increasing. And people, as pretty much every change project that I've been a part of or have consulted with, there are little hiccups and things that happen, and if people are kept in a more positive mood about those changes, then when these little hiccups pop up, you may not only have those who are going to quickly identify that, because one, they're not going to be ostracized or punished for doing something that they felt that they were good at before. Now they're not so good at, and they find an issue. They know they're not going to get blamed for doing something wrong because it was a misjudgment, but that they actually are being encouraged. And because there's that fear factor of being punished has been removed, now they're actually free to think of possible solutions. So they may discover a crinkle in the change that they may be able to smooth out, and then just report back to what they found, possible solutions if they haven't already come up with a solution, so that if other departments or other people in the change process come across the same way, we already have a method for addressing it, at least a starting point, if nothing else. So by encouraging that we're going to move through to a new way of doing things, knowing that we're not going to do well at first, but we together will gradually get better. This is going to strengthen our organization, strengthen the relationship we have with our with the organizations that we interact with, whether it's our vendors, whether it's our government, whether it's other important organizations that help us develop and deliver solutions to our clients. Then they are more likely to want to stick and engage towards the new way of doing things. And then Kotter's last step is to institutionalize those new approaches. This is where the new thing has become an important way of culture in the organization, and this is how things are going to be done from now and going forward. And it's the biggest question I get is, how do we make those changes stick? And that's leveraging on what was done with the seventh step. And this change process is going to have additional elements of change that are going to be at various states, various steps, and by pointing back to some of those changes that have been made and have started to solidify, you see this track record, and the organizational members can see this track record of success, and when there were some hiccups, what was done to create additional elements of success. And these new approaches then become more successful, moving in a direction that they have been shown that works best going forward, that these changes are now the new changes. And wherever you need help, wherever there's something that you just didn't quite get, because maybe you only see this once a month, and if this is a change model that we're trying to execute within 6 to 8 months, then there just may not have been enough opportunities for this person that's in this part of the change to experience the new way of doing things. So let them know that there are no such things as, dumb questions. I mean, truly, and that people feel better about asking questions. That some people may be afraid, I don't ask that question because it shows I'm not getting it. Well, you may not be alone, and somebody may listen and say, "Whew, boy, I'm glad you asked that question because I just wasn't sure how to go about doing this." But helping to make those changes stick is to continue to provide and refine the new way of doing things and the way we did things in the past. By removing those tools, actually take away the ability to do those things once that change has stuck, and people are then comfortable enough to kind of let that pacifier go, and then engage fully in the new direction. And a couple of things that in general, I think, with any change process that are beneficial is to reflect on those changes as you're moving through that process. There are lessons that have been learned. There are people that have tremendous insight as part of the change, and going through to reflect and see, having this issue, we talked to so-and-so, and now that area has been taken care of and is operating smoothly. Maybe we need to go back. So keeping a change log of the process is valuable to seeing where you've been, because it may help other areas of the change process to get a better understanding of where they need to go. Leveraging, I also recommend leveraging multiple leadership styles. This is not a single solution. It's like these books back here. It's not any one book is going to give all of the insight, but collectively there are ideas that come across where certain elements can come from one model that combined with elements from another model can contribute to creating a custom solution, because your environment is unlike any other environment out there. You may have similarities, but your people and your company are unique, and your solution is going to have a certain level of uniqueness as well. And this may sound cliche, but have some fun. Have some fun with it. It's like, how do you have fun with a change management process? It's like, are you kidding me? Well, there are things like before with recognizing people who are contributing to the change and how their engagement is helping them contribute and plan to celebrate those short-term wins, Kotter's 6th step. So there's so many different things. You could have different types of games. You could have company functions where people get together and have a mixer or whatever the case may be. There are these creative elements that can permeate throughout the change process that allows, again, more of that creativity to flourish. And just interacting and keeping everybody encouraged while moving forward through the process. So there are different elements that help to contribute to that, and by engaging in those, then the process is does not seem as daunting as a challenge, and people can become a little bit more optimistic. And one of the things that I just want to close out on is that your organization has its own rhythm, and understanding what that rhythm is, those cycles of operation, as you start to institute a change, you will benefit from a systems thinking approach, to where when an action occurs within a particular part of the organization, there are certain amounts of time that will pass until that reaction or the parts of that action, the results of it, play their way through the entire process. There may be a need to set up checkpoints within that process, because some processes may take considerably longer time than others, and to wait for the entire process to move all the way through may not be beneficial or advisable. So understanding what is the movement, the organization is an organism, and it has a biological clock, and understanding where the biologics are can help provide insight into not only how the change is being absorbed by the organization, but how it's affecting the organization at their different points. So with that, I'll put some information here just after I close out in regards to where you can get additional information. And there's a forum here. If you have questions, just put them down, and I will answer them as quickly as I can. And if there are any additional elements or solutions that you have come up with that you have found to be beneficial in the change process, then by all means, please share them in the comments. I'm sure that we'll all appreciate and have a benefit from the growth. If you have any questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat, and happy change management to you. I don't know what else to say to that, but I'm certain that applying some of these and looking for additional collaborations on change, you'll do fine. And we're all here to help make sure that you have a little bit less stress moving forward, so you can think a little bit more creatively. Thank you, and again, I'm Earle for Victory Leadership.